Hi everybody, it's Az here from HeelvsBabyface on the alpha for World of Warcraft's next expansion, Legion. And don't panic, I'm not going into Shadowfang Keep, it's just a placeholder loading screen. This is actually Black Rook Hold, one of the dungeons which is now available for testing. Now, a couple of things before I start. Number one, you can see it scaled us all up to level 110. That's going to be the maximum level of the expansion. Number two, it's also scaled us gear-wise to 810 item level. So even I have got over 1,000,000 health. And our tank, who, by the way, just happens to be Towley, which was really cool indeed. He had a base health of around about 1.5 million, something like that. So there's going to be huge health pools when we get to top level, with anything around about item level 800, and there's going to be huge damage as well, as you can probably see by some pretty decent numbers already, even in the early stages of this. So there are 4 bosses in this dungeon, and as you can see, it's got a very kind of gothic feel to it. Lots of spirits. There's also a demon hunter vibe to it as well. And if you notice some stops in the footage, we're just standing around for a bit. There was quite a bit of disconnecting. A lot of crashes with various people. So we just had to kind of like suck it up. So the first boss that we managed to get to was the Amalgamation of Souls, which is a reskin, as you can see, of Lord Marrowgar, but rather a cool one. It's got this very nice scythe, and then the heads are raven heads, and then it's got these huge raven wings on the back. So I do like the aesthetic of it. It kind of also has this hint, although it isn't, but it has this hint of the Reliquary of Souls as well. And I quite like that vibe. There's a lot of sort of Wrath of the Lich King vibes in this expansion so far, and that to me can only be a good thing. Now, this boss has got 3 major abilities. The first one is called Reap Souls, and this is going to be a frontal cone attack, and if you are in front of it, you will get struck for 1.2 million damage before modifiers and mitigations, which is a whole lot. And also, you'll be afflicted with a debuff, which will increase your damage taken by 20% for 30 seconds. So that's not something that you want to get hit by. Second ability is called Swirling Scythe. Well, it will actually throw a scythe towards a player, which deals around about 350,000 physical damage, and it also knocks back players that come into contact with this scythe. You can see it spinning around there, so you don't want to get near it. A couple in front of me, you touch it, bang, you get knocked back and take some substantial damage. And then the third and final ability that it does is called Soul Echoes, where it'll select a player, it will fragment its soul and leave behind what it calls Soul Echoes. You can kind of get an idea of where the name for this boss comes from now. Now, those Soul Echoes will explode for 220,000 shadow damage to nearby players. So this is one of those bosses where you just gotta keep spread out. Yeah, don't stand by anybody. If you get a fragmented soul, boom, the pair of you are going to take quite a bit of damage. So if you've got a melee heavy group like we have, just kind of go around the boss a wee bit, keep it shuffling, keep it moving. And if you're ranged, you shouldn't have any difficulty at all. This one only took a little bit longer than it should have, because we had one player die right at the beginning, and then they couldn't get back in the fight, and I think a second person disconnected. Oh dear, it's alpha, you got to expect these things. So, moving on with the rest of the trash. Now, as we plough forward, we come to some pretty cool rooms. This is a very, very nice looking place. If I do have to levy some criticism here, the only thing that I'd really say is it felt like it was missing a boss. there are 4 bosses in here, and it kind of felt like there should be 5. There is a large amount of trash which kind of leads between the first boss and the second boss, and then up to the third boss, and then from the third to the fourth boss, very kind of quick indeed. So it did feel as if that needed to be broken up. It did feel here, possibly, where we are right now, there could have been some sort of mini-boss or event or something along those kind of lines, just to make the feel of it a wee bit different, just to kind of give that break. Do not adjust your sets. Speaking of breaks, I got myself kicked from the game there. It crashed, the client crashed, so we had to load it back in before we could continue. Again, you go. Alpha is alpha. There's nothing you can really say about this. So we kind of came across this guy here, and he sort of kind of filled that void, which I was just talking about the mini-boss. But if you are going to have a mini-boss, then to me, it's still got to provide something. Either some sort of buff or some sort of little bit of loot maybe for just one player. Something on those kind of lines. It felt like, here's a mini-boss, folks, but really it's just a kind of transitional one moving into the next major boss. So yeah, it kind of had a little bit of a pacing issue, shall we say, certainly between the first boss and the second boss, and this is it. Now I'm just going to speed up the first start of the fight because she bugs out. If you go too close to the door, which one of us did, I'm not sure who, could have been me, could have been someone else, she actually dashed towards somebody, broke out of the instance, and then despawned. But she came back in, and everything was okay. And this little lady is called Elise Crest, and she's actually got 2 stages of her fight. Whereas the first boss only had 3 abilities, she's actually got 2 stages plus abilities. So first things first, her first phase is called Vengeance, and she does a Vengeful Shear. Tanks, be careful of this. She'll inflict 1.35 million damage, plus increase the damage that you take by 15% for 25 seconds, and that will stack. On top of that, she does her Dark Rush, where you can see now, she literally dashes between players, and she deals physical damage when she hits them. She also leaves behind this blazing trail, and if you touch that, it ticks for 120,000 fire damage every 3 seconds. On top of that, she'll also do a Brutal Glaive, which deals 150,000 physical damage, and every 2 seconds afterwards will deal 70,000 physical damage, and that will last for 30 seconds, and also has the potential to bounce towards other targets. So healers, you've got to really be on the metal here to see who's got the debuff. And we now see her in her second phase, and this phase is called Fury. Now, there's a very clear ability going on here, and that's the eye beam, where she will fixate on a player, and the eye beam will follow them. So just be careful where you drop the goo on the floor, and the goo is called Fell Blazed Ground, because if you come into contact with that Fell Blazed Ground, you're going to take 175,000 fire damage every second. So don't run it all the way through to the raid. She'll also bring in 2 different types of adds, either a Risen Vanguard, who'll do a Bone Crushing Strike that deals 210,000 physical damage and will stun all players in a frontal cone for 4 seconds. So tanks, be very careful about that. Or a Risen Arcanist, who will do an Arcane Blitz attack, which will deal 200,000 arcane damage and increases the caster's damage by 50% for 10 seconds, and that stacks as well. That ability, though, is interruptible, so it's absolutely vital that you stop those casters, otherwise they're going to tear the groups apart. From there, we go into another lengthy trash segment. So again, it's all about this kind of early doors pacing. And if you think about it, we've only just defeated the second boss. So by the time we've fought our way through to the third one, we've actually probably gone around 3/4 of the way through the dungeon. if not a little bit further. So that kind of gives you an idea of probably how trash intensive the early phases are. And like I said, it just needs to be broken up. I'm not massively bothered about it, but I just definitely think it needs to be broken up in some way. Or, if they're to keep the numbers of trash that they currently have, maybe introduce something, some sort of mechanic that will allow people to cut through that bit quicker. A rocket launcher, you know, just whatever. But this takes us through to the third boss, who is Smash Spite the Hateful. And yes, he does a lot of hateful things. And by the way, just chilling out because somebody else crashed. Think Towley crashed. Now, this boss has 4 major abilities. The first one being Earth-Shattering Stomp, where he will stomp on the ground, surprise, surprise, dealing 288,000 physical damage to all players and knocking them back as well. Second ability, he does a Hateful Gaze. Now, he will focus on a player and charge towards them. When the charge hits them, and it will actually hit the first person that it comes to, so if somebody gets in the way of the charge, they will be the culprit of this. It'll hit them for 800,000 physical damage and knock them back again. But it'll also put a debuff on them that will increase the damage they take from a hateful charge by 100% for a minute. So if you get hit once, you don't want to get hit again. So if you're the target, you need to make sure that somebody line of sight's in front of you to absorb that. Otherwise, chances are you're going to get wiped out. From there, if the boss reaches 100 brutality, so that's his mana, his focus, his energy, then he will unleash a huge haymaker, dealing 1.3 million physical damage to the target, which is likely going to be the tank. And it also increases the damage that they take by 100% for 10 seconds. So healers, if he does that, you've really got to make sure that the tank receives multiple heals in that phase. And then finally, he'll call down a Fell Bat. Now, these will come in more frequently the longer that the fight goes on for, and they'll literally vomit on the ground at a target. And if you touch the vomit on the ground, I ain't even joking, it's called Fell Vomitus. You will actually take 275,000 fire damage. So just, you know, I think there's a moral to the story when it comes to quite a few of these bosses. Don't stand in the fire. There, you see, quite, you know, quite a lesson we should have learnt a long time ago. But here we are on the final boss. Now, there is a lot to this fight, and it's 2 stages long, but it's absolutely brilliant. We've got 2 people in front of us as well. Lord Kurtalos Ravencrest and also Lectosius. Now, this phase, you've got to burn through as quickly as humanly possible. Number 1, Lord Kurtalos will do an unerring shear. It's an attack that deals 1.55 million physical damage and reduces the target's maximum health by 20%. So be careful, tanks. Whirling Blades, where it will throw a glaive at a targeted player that travels between the targeted player and where it was thrown from. If you touch it, it'll deal 375,000 physical damage and knock back anyone as well. And also Lightning Strike, where it will inflict 1.5 million nature damage to any target that gets caught in the lightning blast, and this will affect both players and enemies. So if you stick an enemy in there, it will get whacked. Now, Lectosius, he actually becomes untargetable and goes around the outside of the fight. And he'll do something called Dark Blast, where he'll inflict 850,000 shadow damage to all enemies, or who are us, in a line in front of the caster, and also knock them back. So make sure You've got your eye on him and where he's going to cast it. He'll also fire off shadow bolts that deal 125,000 damage. That's something that the healers can deal with no problem at all. But when Lord Ravencrest dies, it forces the stage 2 of the fight, which you can see we've been in for a few moments. And when he does die, his spirit emerges from his body and he realizes that he's either been corrupted by the Legion or what he's been doing is wrong. And he will bestow upon us, yes, he actually changes and helps us, something called Legacy of Ravencrest. And this will increase our damage, healing, and HP levels by 300%. And our little friend from before, Latosius, turns into Dantalian Axe, this huge demonic form. And then he's got 3 major abilities. He's got this cloud of hypnosis. That's the gas that you can see on the floor. If you touch it, you will fall asleep. It is a magical effect, so it can be dispelled for you to be got out of, but if you take damage, it will wake you up, or if the cloud moves off of you, it will also wake you up. So try and just avoid it completely, because if you get stuck in there, and either the healer's more concerned with keeping other people up, then you can be in there for a fair bit doing not a lot in the fight. He'll also do this Dread Lord's Guile, which we can see going on at the moment, where he will segment back into the Latosius form, and they'll all start casting Obliteration in sequence. Now, literally they'll be going blast, 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 blast. So that's what you could see going flying across the screen. That's also that dark patch on the floor, so you know where it's going to hit. And that is the one that hits you for 880,000. It's just named slightly differently at the bottom section. For some reason, don't know why, it was Dark Blast before, but now it's Obliteration. And then also, he'll do a Shadow Bolt Volley, which hits everybody for 760,000 shadow damage. So you've got to be careful of those as well. But this was a freaking awesome fight. I absolutely loved it. Great movement phases, avoiding the sleeps and all that kind of jazz. And yeah, although we had that rather annoyingly large amount of trash in this dungeon, getting to this final fight definitely felt worth it. So well done, Blizz. I think this is a pretty damn cool dungeon. By the way, Towley has disconnected again. So I think we end the fight with 3 people, but I get myself another little bit there. So I hope you enjoyed the vid. If you did, do get a thumbs up and also subscribe. Follow me on social media and Twitch for live streaming. Those links are in the description down below, and I'll be back with some more stuff very soon. You take care, everybody. Bye-bye.